Lori, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So good evening. We are going to jump right into our Fentanyl Awareness Day screening and panel discussion. My name is Mike Wade. I work for New River Valley Community Services. So good evening. We are going to jump right into our Let's try that again. This is live television. Again, good evening. Welcome. My name is Mike Wade. I work for New River Valley Community Services as coordinator of community wellness and outreach. Great to have you with us this evening. Also with me this evening is Lori Trail. And Lori also works for NRVCS, and she is coordinator of the recovery court programs across the New River Valley. And Lori's with us this evening to hopefully answer some questions that you may have for us at the end of the film. We're going to get started here pretty quickly with the film. It's about 27 minutes, and as soon as that's over with, we will come back and be ready to answer your questions. If you do have questions, please include those in the comments section, and we'll try our best to answer those at the conclusion of the film and try to get everything wrapped up by about 8 o'clock tonight. So bear with me. This is a new venture for us, trying to live stream this kind of thing on YouTube. But we're glad you're here. Appreciate you taking the time to be with us this evening, and hope that you enjoy the film. So if you'll bear with me just a moment, we will try to get the film up and running, and hopefully all this technology works.
Could do to somebody, but it had fentanyl in it. I instantly I died flatlined, like on the floor in front of my mom and in front of my little sister. And all I know that happened after that was what they told me, but I was like not breathing for 20 minutes, and they tried CPR and Narcan and everything, you know. One of the paramedics ended up breaking my ribs to get me to start breathing again. I just woke up 3 days later in the hospital, and I had no idea what happened. I mean, just by the grace of God.
A local teenager dead from a suspected fentanyl overdose.
He lost 2 students to overdoses just in the past 2 months.
Her 17-year-old daughter is the latest local high school student to die of an accidental fentanyl.
Dead after taking pills laced with
Two sons died from fentanyl poisoning. In just one day, there were more than a dozen drug overdoses and 6
Fentanyl can be up to 50 times stronger than heroin.
Drug deaths among children more than tripled from 2019 to 2020.
This is truly an unprecedented time.
We're at a point right now in the United States where each week, the equivalent to a classroom of high school students dies of overdose across the country.
People might be surprised to know that youth substance use has actually been on a downward trend for 20 years. High schoolers' use of illicit substances, excluding marijuana and alcohol, is actually well below 10%. But their deaths have skyrocketed, in particular in the last couple of years, and that's because of fentanyl found in fake pills and other substances.
Since about the mid-20-teens, we started to see this very potent synthetic opioid called fentanyl emerge on the drug landscape, first in the heroin supply, and then it started being used by drug traffickers to produce counterfeit prescription pills.
These are completely fake pills. A lot of young adults in America are getting these pills on social media. Snapchat, WhatsApp, Discord, even Facebook Messenger. Could also be just from friends, or as they call them, plugs, their local drug dealer that they happen to know. Our kids think that they're real and they think that they're safe, and it's a deadly mistake.
Fentanyl is an opioid that's at least 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin. Because it's such a potent opioid, fentanyl can kill within minutes, particularly for teenagers who may have never been exposed to an opioid before and have no tolerance built up. And it's especially risky when it gets mixed with other substances.
With illicit fentanyl, you don't know how much you're using, and frequently it is combined with another drug, whether it's contaminating heroin or contaminating cocaine. It's mixed drug use, which is extremely dangerous and difficult to treat in the ER.
I mean, you don't even know what is in the drugs that you're about to consume. I mean, it could be your last time using. Even if it's your first time using, it could be your last. You know, that's the scary reality now.
Well, Mary and I got into this world after losing our son Charlie in 2020. Charlie was a 22-year-old college senior when he went online and got what he was told was a Percocet. He was familiar with Percocet from a back surgery he'd had about 1.5 years prior to his death. So he knew what Percocet would do to him, and he had a job interview and had just driven back to college after unwillingly living with his parents for a couple of months as a college senior. And when he got back up to campus, his back was hurting. He had a job interview on the phone, so he went out and got a pill off script that he was told was a legitimate medication. And he died from it. And he died on a random Thursday afternoon. It shocked Mary and I because we knew that Charlie did not have a substance use problem. He didn't have any diagnosed mental health issues. He had all the normal stresses of a young person getting ready to launch his life. And it was a crazy time because of COVID. But Charlie is a prime example of this new category of victim, of a young person who is familiar with these medicines, thinks they're safe, thinks they're taking them safely in the recommended dosage, and ends up being poisoned because it's not what was presented. It turned out to be fentanyl, and that's what killed Charlie.
It really is an equal opportunity crisis. There's no geographic boundaries, there's no gender boundaries, there's no socioeconomic boundaries. This is something that everyone is at risk, and everyone has a stake in making sure that we come up with better solutions.
When asked to describe the danger of fentanyl, only 58% of high schoolers listed fentanyl as dangerous, which is far below the number of high schoolers that said cocaine or heroin were dangerous, and about equal to as many who said cigarettes were dangerous. The problem is that 12 times more deaths are being caused by fentanyl than being caused by cocaine or heroin, yet teenagers are rating it as far less dangerous.
I think kids need to realize that even if it comes from their best friend, it's most likely not safe, because the drug supply right now is not safe.
Producers of illicit drugs who supply the black market for street drugs have shifted away from plant-based products like, for instance, heroin, to synthetic chemicals like fentanyl. It makes these drugs extremely profitable, and this changes everything.
The drug cartels are able to synthesize synthetic fentanyl quite quickly in these makeshift labs. We're talking about metal tubs out in the wilderness with shovels mixing. And so by the time it comes to you, it might look real, but it is really very dangerous.
Fentanyl is so potent that it takes such an exceedingly small amount, on the order of really a grain of sand, the tip of a pencil, to potentially be lethal.
It's been approved for what we call analgesia or pain for over 50 years in the United States. And it's been used effectively and safely for general anesthesia, for conscious sedation, and in end-of-life care for patients, for instance, with cancer. But when I give you fentanyl in the operating room, several differences. One, it's through a very closely calibrated, a very quantifiable amount. And we're talking about micrograms. When it's used illicitly, we're in the milligrams. So there's 1,000 micrograms in a milligram. So it's a huge difference in the quantity.
Whether we're talking about pain pills like oxycodone or heroin or fentanyl, it can cause addiction.
The shorter acting, higher potency drugs are going to be more addictive because your body gets that reward very quickly and then it wears off very quickly, which leaves you wanting more.
In the beginning, it was fun. It started out being fun, with my friends. I'm just like rebellious by nature. And then it turned into something I did every day, regularly. It just got harder, stronger, faster. And I would convince myself it's something that I need. I absolutely felt like at a certain point it was becoming something that was bigger than me, and I didn't have control of it. I did push those feelings aside for the longest time and justified reasons to myself why everything was okay and my actions were okay, how treating people badly was okay, and just continued to go and go until like the real consequences, came to the surface. And for you, you're like in this place that you don't want to be at before you even realize it.
We have two boys. Miles is our older son, and our younger son, Cal. Cal was very involved in theater and taught swim lessons and very social, had lots of friends. And he lived really, really large. And part of living large with Cal was his emotions. With the COVID epidemic happening, the wheels came off a little bit. We all leaned in together as a family and got to be in pretty good shape before the fall when he went off to university in Hawaii and had a pretty good first semester. When he came home at the holiday break in December, we were really looking forward to catching up with Cal. And when we woke up on Monday morning and went in to check on him, and unfortunately we found him unresponsive, and we called 911 and did CPR, and Jennifer found a small bag with a couple of blue pills in them next to him. Jennifer shared them with the sheriff's deputy, who said that looks like OxyContin, but it's most likely fentanyl. And he added, if you're the praying type, you should start praying. So Cal was able to get to the hospital, but we weren't able to bring Cal home. We discovered in Cal's, in his browsing history, that the day before he purchased this pill, he had gone online and asked, what is OxyContin? What's a safe dose for my weight? And how will it interact with my anxiety medicine? He definitely did not have a dependency or substance use disorder, which I say not because that makes Cal in any way a better person or his death matter more, but because I mostly would like others to know that there may not be signs and that you don't have to be down the road of dependency or addiction to suffer what happened to Cal in the age of fentanyl.
This is the generation that's very familiar with prescription meds. So if you were born in the late 90s or early 2000s, you had classmates who probably were taking some medication for learning differences, anxiety, sports injuries. And so the familiarity with these pills and the fact that they're everywhere in movies and pop culture and commercials, that there's a pill for every ill. The counterfeit pills that are on the market today are very difficult to distinguish from the real prescription pills. They're made in what's called a pill press, and the drug producers, illicit drug producers, get the dyes, the stamps, and they put them in these pill presses, and they stamp out pills that look like a real Xanibar or a real Percocet. The most commonly counterfeited pill is what's presented as an Oxy or a Percocet, and it's stamped with an M on one side and a 30 on the other.
It's so cheap to make, and they're making these pills for cents. And they're selling them for dollars, 10, 15, 20, and they may have made it for 50 cents. But when somebody dies, that person who's selling them this, they're not thinking about that person. They're thinking about their profits. The cost of doing business includes some downsides, like maybe they lose some customers.
The U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency tells us that 60% of the counterfeit pills that are out there right now contain potentially lethal doses of fentanyl. And so many of the pills that people might think are real, they might think that that pill that they encounter on social media that somebody tries to sell them, or that they encounter, through a drug dealer who's trying to sell them something, or even just through a friend who's passing them something, that pill, more likely than not, is not what they think it is. It hasn't been prescribed by a doctor. It hasn't been dispensed by a pharmacy. And in fact, it's fake, and more likely than not that the amount of fentanyl in one of these pills could kill someone.
We lost, 108,000 people last year to overdose. And that's just the fatalities. There are a lot of non-fatal overdoses as well. Years ago, if someone was using heroin, it would probably be far into their use before they would be at the point where they could overdose. Now you can overdose with your first pill. It's just a different situation.
When I was growing up, we talked about the drug landscape in terms of a path. But today, kids are faced with a landscape that's less like a pathway and more like a minefield, where their first, second, or third step out there could be their last, because you don't know what's in those substances.
Jules was about to enter her junior year. She was getting ready for that, and unfortunately did not make it to her junior year. She passed away a few months short of her 16th birthday, so I had to have a birthday vigil for my daughter instead of a sweet 16. They're so impressionable. We do live in a social media world, and this encounter, this horrific life event with my daughter taught me just how prevalent and easily accessible things like this can become through social media. I thought I was checking all my bases by having a conversation with my children. Teenagers. I didn't know that there was still a way that they could be persuaded, that my daughter could be persuaded.
I was 15 years old, and I was curious about substances, but I didn't learn about it through any formal sources. And so I set about my own experimentation without any guidance and without any recommendations for staying safe. And I experienced challenges and consequences related to that. And when I recovered, I realized that there was a lot of other teens that were also entering the space, also without information and guidance. And I think that in order for us to effectively deliver messages about drugs, adults need education too.
We need to equip parents to have these conversations with their teens. We need to help parents understand that the best way to approach their teen is from a place of curiosity and understanding, and creating a safe space so that if a young person has been using substances, they feel like they can approach their parent about it, or that if they've got a friend who's struggling, they feel like they can let their parent know that.
The big three signs of an opioid overdose, such as one from fentanyl, are slow to no breathing, unconsciousness, and pinpoint pupils. How you can check for those three? For slow to no breathing, you're going to place your hand on the person's chest to feel for the rise and fall of their breath. You can also place your hand under their nose or over their mouth and feel for their warm breath. To check for unconsciousness, you're going to start by shouting the person's name and asking if they can hear you. If they don't respond to you verbally engaging with them, you're going to cause some painful stimuli. To do that, you're going to give them what's called a trap pinch. You're going to pinch the corner between their neck and their shoulder as hard as you can. If you try that on yourself, it hurts. So if you do that to somebody who might be overdosing, they're not going to respond. The third sign that you're going to check for, which is the telltale sign of an opioid overdose, is pinpoint pupils. So how you're going to check for that? You can use a flashlight like the one on your smartphone. The person's probably going to be unconscious, so you're going to lift their eyelid and shine the flashlight into their eye for 3 to 5 seconds. When you move the flashlight away, normal people, you will see their pupil get bigger when the light is no longer in their eye. Someone with a fentanyl overdose, their pupil is going to remain pinpoint, very tiny in the middle of their eye.
It is absolutely critical that you call 911 when somebody is overdosed, because that makes sure that they get the medical attention they need, and that could very much save their life. Many states have what's called a Good Samaritan law, which protects people who call 911 when they're in the possession of drugs from being arrested for having those drugs in the moment, because these laws are meant to encourage people to do the right thing when someone's overdosing.
Narcan is an opioid blocker. It's going to go into the bloodstream and knock any opioid off of the receptor. And it's going to reverse that overdose so that that person has a chance at life. We're using the term Narcan, which is a brand name. The actual generic is naloxone, and there are many brands. The side effects of intranasal naloxone or Narcan, if somebody was not actually overdosing, the chance of having a serious health problem as a result are very small.
This is what Narcan looks like. If you're ever in a situation where you're going to administer Narcan, you should have already called 911. To administer Narcan itself, all you have to do is take it out of the package. It looks like this. You're going to insert the plunger into the person's nose, either nostril, and then press the pink button down. After that, you're going to want to clock about 2 minutes. The person should respond to the Narcan within those 2 minutes. If they're unconscious and not breathing, you will literally see them go and begin breathing again. If that doesn't happen within the first 2 minutes, continue doing that every 2 minutes until the person responds. If they don't respond after 3 doses, you're going to want to start giving rescue breaths.
One more thing to remember about Narcan is that anytime it's given, a person needs to go to the hospital. Opioids can last longer than Narcan. So the Narcan might reverse the overdose initially, and then the Narcan wears off, and guess what's still in your bloodstream? The opioid. Can find those receptors and they can re-OD.
Narcan and naloxone in general is now approved over the counter. Everyone should be trained in how to recognize and respond to an overdose.
If you're a person who needs opioids and you have a dependence on them, it's very useful to use a fentanyl test strip to determine if there's fentanyl or one of its analogs in the substance you're about to take. If you are in your 20s, 30s, and 40s and you're getting some cocaine, you should know that cocaine has been contaminated and the frequency of contamination is rising.
Fentanyl test strips can be used on any drug as long as you prepare that drug correctly. So we instruct users to crush whatever it is in its entirety, mix that up, and then you use about 50 milligrams of that powder.
There is a risk of getting a false negative. The test may not pick up the particular analog. The dilution rate might not be right, so it's not foolproof. Because the problem is inconsistent dosing, you can't shave some of a pill and use that as your sample and not be 100% sure that there's not fentanyl in the other portion of the pill. And you certainly can't test one pill from a baggie, have it come back negative, and be confident that the rest of the baggie does not contain fentanyl. The main takeaway from that message is if anyone presents a pill to you and says, don't worry, this has been tested, that is not a true statement. And you cannot trust any pill that you get on the street.
The expectation is that you don't take any pill or powder that's coming from an unregulated source, but if you did, it is a non-negotiable to carry Narcan with you. It is a non-negotiable to not use alone, and it is a non-negotiable to test your drugs. These are the steps you have to take. While it's not perfect, it's the bare minimum to keep yourself alive.
I think it's a perfect storm. I think you've got kids coming out of COVID who are really struggling with a lot of social anxiety, particularly, a lot of depression, and an inability to cope with some of the big feelings they're having. I think you look at the isolation that's sort of magnified by social media, the sort of looking at everyone else's perfect life and feeling like yours is not so perfect. And then also the deadliness of the drug supply. And all those things come together, and it is a massive crisis that we're in right now as a country.
Leno Ramos took a blue pill he got from his friends. They said it was Percocet, but it was actually pure fentanyl. He was left unconscious in a parking lot and died alone at age 15. Kirsten Torres Young and her friends split a fake Percocet they ordered on Snapchat. Both girls passed out, but only the friend could be resuscitated. Kirsten was just 19. Zach Didier was bored with the lockdown and wanted to experiment. He was also feeling stressed about his college applications. He connected with a dealer on Snapchat and took a counterfeit Percocet made of fentanyl. Zach was 17 years old when he died. Luke Emanuel was having tooth pain when he was offered Percocet by an online friend. He died alone in his bedroom just weeks before his 14th birthday and the day before starting 8th grade. I don't want anybody to be in my seat. I don't want other people to feel this. I don't want to keep hugging other parents that have lost a child like I have.
The best thing that parents can do is educate themselves about the dangers of drugs and right now, not like what happened 20 years ago, what's going on right now. The worst thing you can do would be trying to get in there and pry it from them, because then they're just going to want to do it more. Just talk to them not like you're telling them what to do, but to help them understand that you care about them.
I think the power of these conversations is they open up doors for help seeking. That when we have conversations about drugs that are non-judgmental, that are honest, that provide multiple pathways for staying safe, not just abstinence, then we invite the kids in who need help. And instead of them turning to their friends, the naive leading the naive, they can come to an adult.
I think encouraging help-seeking behavior is really important, whether that's someone at school or someone at home. It's okay to ask for help. There's no valor in, having day after tough day and sticking it out and burying our feelings and saying, I can get through this without anyone else's help.
The thing that I did was I got out of my comfort zone. I did things that made me feel uncomfortable, talked to people, made connections with people, actually asked for support. I think that's the biggest thing, is people think asking for help is a weakness, when it's actually a strength. And opening your mouth and letting people know that you are struggling, because I feel like that's a lot of the reason why people are ending up dying and we're losing people, because they don't want to admit that they need help.
None of us asked for this crisis. None of us asked to have people we love passing away due to a preventable cause, but that is the thing about it, is it is entirely preventable, and every single one of us can do our part by being educated and carrying materials on us that have the capacity to save lives.
I think our greatest and most untapped resource in this crisis is young people themselves. And when we prepare young people beginning in 6th and 7th and 8th grade to be peer educators, to be leaders of public health in this space, we shift culture. And it's not drug education that prevents drug problems, it's culture that prevents drug problems. And young people are shapers of culture.
We can stop these deaths from happening. We didn't start this problem, but we can be part of the solution.
So thanks for joining us for the film. I hope that those of you who are with us this evening found that informative. I hope you found it terrifying, because it truly is. This is an issue that is affecting a lot of communities around the country, including those here in the New River Valley. We're not immune from this by any means. And as they discussed in the film, what's so scary about fentanyl is its high potency and the fact that it's truly not detectable by sight, taste, smell, and those trace amounts. As they said in the film, a grain of sand or the tip of a pencil lead is literally enough to be fatal. And they referenced the DEA's estimation of how many pills they take off the streets are containing those lethal amounts of fentanyl. They referenced 60%, but I was in a webinar just a couple of weeks ago with someone from the DEA who estimates that it's as high as 8 out of 10 pills that they now take off the streets that have lethal amounts of fentanyl contained in them. So certainly that's a huge concern, and the message that I think we want to get across to you, that was sort of touched upon in the video that we just watched, is you can't take a pill or substance that doesn't come from a certified pharmacy that has your name on the label of that bottle or package. If that's not directly prescribed for you from a certified pharmacy, you can't take it. You can't take it if it's offered by a family member or a friend, because they may not know that this pill has fentanyl contained within it, and they may unknowingly give you something that could possibly cause you to overdose or even end your life. So if you don't get a pill or a substance that's prescribed to you from a certified pharmacy with your name on the label, you simply can't take it. If you do, you're playing Russian roulette, literally. It's that serious. You know, I know that for those of us who are a bit older, we've been through phases in our lives, and we know previous generations have had those times when we're younger that we experiment with certain substances. But the reality of where we are today in 2024, with the prevalence of fentanyl being so readily available and out there and mixed quite often with other substances, is that experimentation can cost you your life in an instant. So there is no room for error, and there's often no second chances when it comes to fentanyl. So it's frightening, it's truly terrifying, and we have to take this serious as a community. I'm keeping an eye out on our chat here for any kind of questions or comments. I don't see anything at this point, but I'm going to throw it over to Lori, just so Lori, you can tell some of what you've experienced and encountered in terms of working with folks through the Recovery Court program, and maybe your experiences with them struggling with fentanyl.
Thanks, Mike. I think I would just kind of echo some of what the video said and what you said. I've been working with the Recovery Court programs for the last 10 years. And so working very closely with individuals with substance use disorders in our community for the last 10 years. And I think it's really important to remember that I think there was a comment and a reference to fentanyl poisoning. And I think that's important to remember, because I think the participants and the folks that I've worked with, when they've lost their lives, they were trying to escape some type of pain, whether that be physical, emotional, not intending to end their life. And so I think we all know people who, in our families, ourselves, who struggle emotionally, who struggle with physical pain. And the scary part of that now is that, like you said, that one act of something that maybe you've done multiple times in the past and you've come back from that, you might not come back. And that's, I think, the terrifying part of this. I think too, just we talk about the numbers, and the numbers, I think we talk about it because it's startling. They mentioned over 100,000 people who've lost their lives. But I do think just remembering that the individuals that we've lost, their lives mattered. No matter, what the circumstances, no matter whether it was the first time or whether they've had a substance use disorder for many years, I think their lives mattered. And I think we have to remember that those numbers kind of represent somebody's child, somebody's mother, father, brother, sister. And that is a pain and, a loss that people just can't, families can't recover from once that's happened. So I think it's such an important topic because I think it does impact so many people's lives in our community.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that this particular film used the word talk, because I think that's really what it comes down to, and they alluded to that quite a bit in the video. But having those conversations and opening up that dialogue, whether it's with a young person that you're concerned about or just somebody in your life that maybe struggles with addiction or substance use disorders, to be able to be that safe person that they can come to and talk about their struggles and challenges and not feel the shame and guilt that's often associated with substance use disorders. I mean, that's part of the reason people don't come forward with that, is because there's such a heavy stigma placed upon this issue and this condition. And, I know Lori would probably weigh in and echo this, but I think what we have to understand as a community and as a society is that that addiction is a disease. A substance use disorder is a condition that deserves treatment, support, understanding, empathy, and care, just like any other chronic condition might. And so it's unfortunate that for whatever reason our society tends to place those labels, those stigma terms on top of folks who are already battling this terrible disease. This isn't a matter of just bad people doing bad things. I mean, you saw in the stories that were shared tonight, these are really good families, really good parents who love their kids, that want the best for them, and they all have bright futures. But, because their child made this one fatal mistake, they don't have a chance at that future. So these aren't bad people doing bad things or weak people or, morally failed individuals. These are young people who are just reaching out. Maybe they are struggling with some kind of issue, some kind of pain. And then sometimes maybe it's just a matter of curiosity. But, I'll go back to what Lori said earlier. I don't think most people who lose their lives to addiction set out to intentionally die. I just don't believe that. I know there are some people who choose to die by suicide, and perhaps they use substances as a method of dying by suicide. I realize that is true in some cases, but the majority of folks who struggle with addiction and ultimately lose their lives, and it's not just opioids, it could be nicotine, tobacco products, alcohol. I mean, Lori, you can speak to this. The folks that you work with in the Recovery Court program, it's not all about opioids, is it?
Right. But I do think what's important to remember now is, just like they reference the fact that the prescription medications, unless, like you said, Mike, you're getting it from a pharmacist and you really don't know. The same thing is true for all of the other substances. You may be using methamphetamine, for example, that is laced with fentanyl. And we see that often where people, they did not intend to use an opiate. They did not intend to use fentanyl, but it was mixed or laced with what they were planning to use.
Right. And to go back to the point that was made around counterfeit pills, a lot of young people reaching out for things that they think are one thing, and they turn out to be fentanyl, like a Percocet or a Xanax. I mean, we know we've got a colleague at NRVCS who lost her son because he took what he thought was a Xanax, and it turned out to be 100% fentanyl, and lost his life from that. So it's a significant issue, and fentanyl is produced at a level where it's so readily available and so cheap that it literally is mixed in with a lot of other stuff. And again, you just can't be too careful when it comes to this. It's something we all have to be aware of. And, you know, I think they did a good job in the video of coaching us on how to talk to young people if we're concerned about them. It's not about wagging our fingers or making them feel bad. It's really coming from a place of concern and care and understanding. So if you have young people in your home, I really encourage you to have those conversations and let them know that it is okay to come to you if they're struggling, if they need help, and to put more of a positive light on this. It would be similar to maybe they're struggling with a physical ailment of some kind. You know, they've got a sore arm or leg or something like that. You wouldn't want them to suffer or live with that without you knowing. So this to me is no different.
And I'll say, Mike, I have a child who's in that middle school age, and I think anytime they don't want to feel different in any way. I mean, that's at the age where they want to try to fit in and be the same. And so I think, like you said, being able to have those conversations, normalize that, making sure that they know it's okay if they do struggle with anxiety, they do feel nervous. I think life is hard right now. And I think a lot of the kids have had to experience things that we as adults sometimes haven't had to experience or live through. So I think being able to have those honest, transparent conversations, because I don't think this is something that you can have a middle school child and think my middle school child might not be exposed to that. They may have that opportunity at that point. So having those conversations early is important. And like you said, taking that stigma away, we all should feel passionately and care, because none of us are immune from this. And none of us, they reference that it's not a socioeconomic thing. It doesn't discriminate. And we all have to kind of remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. This could happen to any of us or anyone that we care and love about, care about and love. And I was somewhat surprised when I saw the graph around the perception of harm that young people have when it comes to fentanyl, that they don't see it much more harmful than they do cigarettes. So that's kind of scary, just from a prevention standpoint, that there doesn't seem to be that level of concern or perception of harm among young people about how serious fentanyl actually can be. I mean, if you're talking about a drug that is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, I mean, that is a serious substance. And obviously only a trace amount of that can be a big problem. So, still not seeing any questions. There's a comment from Chris, who works with the harm reduction program with the New River Health District, the Rise Above program. They're doing a lot of mobile outreach in the community around harm reduction to help support folks who are struggling with substance use disorders. They've got data that they've been collecting as part of that program. And let's see, Chris says, depending on the county, fentanyl is in meth, cocaine, heroin, and some pressed pills. And that some localities it's more prevalent than others. So just something to be mindful of. But I think the statistic is now that 42% of Americans know someone who's been directly affected by overdose. And Lori and I were talking before we started the live stream tonight. It's not too hard to think about folks that we know personally who have either struggled with this or lost their lives. So from a community standpoint, I think we just have to underscore the need for compassion and understanding, giving folks who struggle with this issue an opportunity to come forward, to feel supported and not judged or not ostracized for their struggles, but be receptive as a community to help steer them in the right direction and get them the help that they need when they are ready for that. And until they are ready for that, we have to keep them around. So harm reduction, having naloxone available, using that when someone overdoses is incredibly important, because they won't be successful in treatment if they're dead. And I use this line a lot when I do naloxone trainings, but the path to recovery does not go through the morgue. And so until someone's ready to get professional help and seek treatment for their addiction issues, we have to keep them alive. We have to do whatever we can to keep them as healthy and safe as possible. And so that needs to be our approach as a community moving forward, and then just educating ourselves about not only the challenges that are out there, but also the resources that are available. And you can find those through the link that was shared at the end of the video. You can also visit the NRVCS website, the New River Health District website. There's also the NRV Recovery Ecosystem website and social media that you can follow. So lots of resources and supports out there for folks who are struggling. But again, I think the takeaway from this is fentanyl. It's not something we can play around with. It's not something that young people can take a chance on. And again, if you don't get a pill from a certified pharmacy with your name on the label, on the bottle, or the package, you can't take it. You simply can't take that risk. Any closing thoughts, Lori, before we wrap it up?
No, I think I just continue to go back to the last thing I think I would say is that I think for me, this work that I currently do and have done for the last 10 years has been the most rewarding job that I've ever done. And I will say that I do work with a population of folks who people do tend to stigmatize and who people do tend to judge. And I think I see just all of the good in those people and the fact that their lives do matter. And so we should, I just continue to say that people's lives matter. And so it's important for us to care. It's important for us to come together as a community and not judge and not believe, well, they made a decision, so that's the result of that decision. Like you said, there's various levels and there's some people who it's the first time. But even if it's not the first time, their lives matter, and we should all be working together to combat this the best that we can.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up tonight. Lori, thank you for being with us this evening. And thanks to all of you who are tuned in and watching this evening. We'll try to get this saved and on our YouTube channel. So if you need to go back and watch it or you want to share it with other folks, you'll have the opportunity to do that. But again, thank you, and take care of yourselves, and we will see you soon. Have a great evening.